The Sleepers, Chapter 39, New Client. After 3 weeks of routine sleep transfer, Jane reached 80% dream acceptance. If we classified clients just as we did sleepers, Jane would rank at the top. Her heightened dream aptitude, the ability to dream easily and frequently, made dream reception particularly innocuous. Despite the accelerated REM cycle, Jane assimilated the majority of alien brain patterns and devised her own creations born of my seeds, pushing the limits of client dream activity. If I didn't need to preserve secrecy and her anonymity, I would have brought her into the office for sleep studies. Her recall of adapted dreams, even from my garbled, non-lucid transfers, was incredible, a product of her years as an active personal dreamer. It seemed her brain was made to dream. After 1 month, she experienced few, if any, absolute dream rejections. I was officially her sleeper, and she knew what to expect. We had established normal pattern recognition. Jane shot up from the couch, her newly preferred place of sleep, her face contorting to a petulant, soundless accusation. I had sat at her feet while she slept, expecting this barrage. "So, how did you like your sleep?" I asked casually as I removed the sleep connections. I was really starting to love those yellow pajamas. "You know how I liked it. Why didn't you warn me?" She pushed deep air out of her mouth, loudly communicating her feisty frustration. I couldn't resist a smile despite her fury. "I wanted you to feel like I did with Carl, a startling new reality. Nothing really prepares you for someone's full lucidity anyway. It is too surreal. Besides, I wanted you to feel as Ray would, should I blow it all and dream in open protest to sleep free." Jane shook her head in disbelief, collecting her thoughts as she mumbled, "I thought you were going to wait. You said you were going to wait." Then, more emphatically and drawn out, she added, "We talked about waiting." "Waiting is over, Jane. You were ready. Another day would mean little for your sleep conversion." I recognized the need to assuage her anger, but I wanted to discuss the beauty of lucidity, now that she could see and experience. Lucidity was my life, and I had not spoken of it with an empathetic conspirator since Carl Schleife, and one could hardly call Carl empathetic. "Forget your shock. Tell me what you felt. What do you think?" I craved feedback like a schoolboy. Still shaking her head, but now out of amazement and not resentment, she replied, "You were right, John. Lucidity is remarkable. It was clearer than any sleeper dream, perhaps sharper than my own dreams. I observed life as a tangible movie reel. I saw myself. I had no control, as if trapped in another's body, or rather like a puppet. I couldn't see the puppet master, but my body moved and my eyes observed. I couldn't change the perspective. Only the puppet master had such control." She shuddered. I had not warned Jane that I would start dreaming lucidly today, nor had I prefaced what she would dream. I needed a surprise, at least once. "What did you see? How much came through?" "I can only imagine I saw as you wanted me to see. There was a race." She paused and looked at me with tilted head. "The dream is so clear in my mind. I have decent recall of my dreams, but the image of this dream is perfect. I can picture every detail. Why?" I was impatient to hear the story. Borrowed sleep, compressed into minutes, has a different effect on the client's mind than natural sleep. Basically, if you have a lucid dream, or any very clear dream above all the typical noise from a sleeper, it will be especially vivid upon waking. It is why I could transmit rich nightmares to Ray and really traumatize him in our childhood. Now go on. What did you see? "Nightmares? Tell me more," she asked, suddenly distracted. "Another time. Can't waste this dream or your moments of recollection. I need you to tell me everything while it is fresh." "Okay. There was a race, and I was the audience, or rather, the master of ceremonies. It was just me watching the runners. I stood among the racers. I mean, Jane stood among the racers, while I, the dreamer, observed. There were other racers, all women." "Yes, go on," I urged. "I was so pretty, or at least in the eyes of the dreamer I was beautiful. But there were other clearly attractive women among the contestants. She closed her eyes, picturing the race. Hey, why were you thinking of so many women? Here came the feisty elbow. Just continue. I'll make my purposes known soon enough. I'm just happy to hear you recognized yourself. That's incredible. It has taken a lot of practice to think of people in dreamland and build a resemblance to reality. Our mind subconsciously resists accurate portrayal, instead relying on our interpretation of the dream. But again, enough distractions. What happened in the race? I think you already know. You dreamed it, she retorted sharply. Yes, but I want to hear it. I want to know from your lips what you experienced. This is for research. She responded with vapid acceptance. Fine, I'll finish for your sake. Jane would finish tonight and every subsequent night for the next 2 months, as I perfected dream construction to destroy Ray. We, the racers, were clear competitors, viciously battling to reach the finish line. Was it easy to recognize yourself? Yes, it was a perfect match. I felt it was me. No, feeling is not enough. Think harder. Was it a perfect physical match, undeniable in resemblance? She paused to consider the import of my questions and answered, No, it was not perfect. I knew it was me by the way you looked at me. But there were differences between us, some subtle and some just off, more like someone trying to be me rather than looking in a mirror. Why does it matter so much anyway? My mind raced as I considered how to perfect the replication. Distracted, I began to answer, Dreams are obscure and hazy. We know an individual may be our spouse or parent because of the personal context, the feelings of the observer. She accepted the reason. That makes sense. I continued, knowing too often I acted more like a professor and not a boyfriend. Upon retrospection, we may realize this fictitious person shares no physical resemblance with the original, but our mind doesn't care. We are happy with the false replica as it fits our mental need. But for our manipulation to work on Ray, exactness is going to matter. Feeling alone will not suffice, because Ray doesn't know you yet. Suffice for what? Asked Jane, remembering there was much more to the dream. We'll get to it. Go on with the dream, I insisted, delaying the inevitable discussion. Fine. The race was cutthroat and unsettling. There were no rules, only victory. With 100 meters to go, I pushed harder and pulled clearly ahead as the victor. The other girls stumbled, collided, and disqualified, leaving me the incontestable winner. And what of the awards? What did you win? I pressed. Jane patronized me with a pat on the leg, as if she were settling her dog. There was no trophy, no standard track and field medal. In fact, there were no silver or bronze racers, only recognition for the winner. As the master of ceremonies, I, the dreamer, watched the proceedings exchanged silently, unwilling to interfere. Each loser approached the real me, the racer, on the dais, and gave me something, as if it were my birthday. I opened them for the audience of one, me. These were not typical presents. I could not stop smiling. This was going to work. She paused, contemplating the details, then continued. Instead, each racer bestowed on me their greatest quality. From one racer, a frizzy redhead, I received sympathy. From another, gentle colloquialism. And from the final, strength and domination. Of all my competitors, this last racer, a tall, blonde, dressed in blue, was the most stunning and frightening. There were other gifts, but they run together. She laughed, recognizing her pun. With the gift transfer, my stature increased, and I, the dreamer, the observer, felt a greater pull for me, the racer, an indescribable magnetic pull. We stared at each other without movement. I wanted to kiss her, you or me or myself. The dreamer wanted to embrace the winner, hold her tight, and never let go. But I just watched and let telepathy do its job. You did it, Jane. I did it. You lived my dream and processed the interpretation. We are so close. But Jane appeared despondent and distracted, unfazed by the accomplishment. Why didn't you kiss me? Why did we only stare? The dream called for a champion's kiss. That's very insightful. A dream is always a metaphor, even a lucid dream, if it is to be perceived as a dream and not a manipulation. It must carry the obscurity of metaphor to embolden the recipient with the ambiguity of interpretation. What? She asked, more perplexed. You can't give it all away, I clarified. If you unfold the entire mystery, if you drive every point to the logical conclusion, then the dream is too logical. It will fail. Ray needs certain, albeit few, vagaries to digest the message. Then what is the interpretation? I hesitate to ask, because I think I know. The veil over this metaphor is thin, and the implications unnerving. Jane's despondency grew worse, conveyed through her distant gaze. Jane, you wanted to be part of the plan, and there was always a plan. I have to test the power of my dreams, the efficacy of lucidity, and the art of lucid dreaming before I go transmit the drug formula. I need a test, a concrete, objective challenge to prove Cumulus works. No, John, Jane protested, sensing my conclusion from the race. I'm not sure when I stumbled on the idea of testing Cumulus's efficacy against Ray's love life, but once the idea sprouted, I would not be dissuaded. If I hadn't managed to twist Ray from crawling back to Gabby, I would have lost my chance. But ice cream and manipulation are sweet and subtle companions. Yes, I need a test. We will transmit a dream of you to him. If needed, we will transmit until he is haunted by you. And then you will prove my power. Ray has sworn to me that he's through with dating. Though I have never believed him before, I believe it this time. I have watched him wallow for much of this year since his last breakup and recover. He has severed ties with his heartsick aspirations and put away love. You are the test. You will prove we can change a man. We can make him do what his mind counts as ridiculous. You may ask about the other racers. Why the gifts? They represent the previous women, all leading to one final girl who is not you, Jane. If you had met these women, you would know that you are not the girl for him, not the final splash, as I like to call it. But he will meet you, and this dream will tell him otherwise. It is not enough to trick his mind. Ray can be deceived and is notoriously fickle. But if he falls in love with you, we have tricked his heart and his fate. We have proven our lucidity. And guaranteed the fall of sleep free? Prodded Jane, intrigued by my plan, though unsettled by its price. Yes, and proven that sleep free as we know it will fail. Lucidity will ruin the use of sleepers. The system will be too dangerous, and we will win. We will win, I repeated, emphasizing the we to ensnare my love. Despite her initial reluctance at interpretation, Jane brightened, now appearing perfectly stoic. All right, John, let's get this dream right. I can only guess that I get one chance with Ray. We better have it right. We refined lucidity like a child's number guessing game, bouncing around the solution and, with each new dream test, methodically closing the gap on the perfect dream. When we finished, when we were truly satisfied, there was no doubt that Jane looked upon herself in the race. Carl had never taught me how to perfectly match images in dream truth. With Jane's feedback and corroboration, I became Carl, perhaps even better thanks to Cumulus coursing through my veins. Part 5. John. Chapter 40. Puppet Master.
Having said goodbye to John, Jane made her way to the next secret meeting for what promised to be a long exchange. Cautiously, she approached the rendezvous point. She had not spoken in weeks with her employer, he being overseas and too private to accept any electronic updates, especially when this important. John Jr. had chosen this location for their meetings due to its isolation. He was so much like his son. Both struggled with the sleeper system. Both were enamored with solitude. Nearly each of the exchanges occurred in this same parkland oasis. Overgrowth along the main footpath through the downtown gardens had concealed a diversion to his favorite adjoining glade. The city neglected and forgot about the excursion, allowing brush and twig to nibble away the path. If you were brave enough to push through the branches and knew where to look, you found an uncut clearing with a single dilapidated bench and a lone picnic table. Into these woods Jane crept, prepared for this surreptitious ritual. "Good evening, Jane." "Hello, sir," she replied to the puppet master. Poised on the bench, a model stolen from classic photography, sat John Jr., studiously pondering his next move and eagerly awaiting the news on his son. "What do you have to report? Has he done it?" he asked, holding back his own excitement at the reward for years of patience. "Yes, he has." "I knew it! I knew he could do it! How did you find out?" He motioned to the seat. "Here, sit down." "I followed your directions." She wanted to scream or cry out for obeying this man, but he was right, and she had succeeded. "I pushed him until he spilled his guts. I complained about the little time we are together given his secret work, until finally he cracked." It felt a bit like bragging, but breaking John's walls was a source of pleasure, not because she was such a great spy, but because she loved him. "Anyway, he has discovered the lucid drug and trusted me with the secret. He tried to sideline me, but I pressed further, and now I'm working with him on his plan to manipulate Ray. It is exactly as you said it would be." John Jr.'s smile grew wide. "Of course it is. Confidence was the next step. Great minds want to share. He worked this plan with Carl Schleif years ago, and before that, Carl and I worked the same plan. He is on a path I started him on from birth. If he has the dedication to see it through, then he will find his path is sure." What exactly was he saying? Jane could see why John hated conversations with his father. He spoke in painful and cryptic riddles and had a talent for excluding all the key information, and that's just how he strung along his puppets. "What do you mean about Carl?" she asked, confused. "When you recruited me, it was clear I was your tool, the means of John's success." Before he could respond, Jane qualified her statement. "I could live with being a tool, knowing the purpose, but what about Carl? From what I've heard, he doesn't strike me as a willing instrument." "Jane, you are the final piece. I told you what you needed to know at my office that day. Now I will tell you more that you may doubt not, and see your work through to finish. John has been influenced and directed by some very fine characters in his life, least of all me. But I placed these players on his path. A nation of individuals backs every great man. These individuals, creators of heroism, may inspire by example, demanding greatness as master to pupil. They may equally inspire by their harshness, driving the hero to achieve in the face of persecution. Great men require such inspiration. Certain success cases recognize the contribution of these primers. Truly great and dangerous men, such as my son, eschew the contribution concept. They must believe, whether by choice or accident, that they have achieved their purpose more or less alone. Thus, their self-confidence is increased, unlocking the mental capacity to accomplish the greater tasks set before them. John doesn't know that Carl, Lucius, and you were dominoes placed in his path by me." She interrupted, unable to handle how deep the deceit ran. "Carl and Lucius? Really? Is everyone in your son's life in league with you?" "Not everyone, but enough," he answered with a loving chuckle. "Jane, I have done everything necessary to shape my son's life, committing many new sins to expunge the old ones, and I will continue to do whatever is necessary." Jane could clearly see the madman resemblance between father and son. "But why not just work with him?" she asked, seeking an answer for which she had always wondered.
I would have, if he had let me. His brilliance was obvious from birth. Here was a child aware of his surroundings, eager to learn and discover. In fact, he loved every new morsel of knowledge and opportunity, until sleep crushed his spirit. When John assumed the family job at age 8, he abandoned innocence and embraced bitterness. Despite being a loving parent, I could not rekindle my son's trust. I was part of the problem, the reason he was sleeping, and although John slept for Ray, he blamed me, my company, my legacy, my religion, and my failure to protect him from Sleep-Free. The chance to jointly undo sleep vanished. So I changed my plans. I would not let him suffer through his journey alone, so I became the puppet master, conspired with the best minds, and hired you, a stunning, passionate schoolteacher, to see him finish.
Jane did not reply, unsure if this was love for his son or his own version of crazy plotting against Sleep-Free. The men in this family had very deep issues.
As I have observed John, I have learned he is more likely to succeed believing he is doing it alone. Yes, he may have recognized that Carl advanced the plan, but the drug creation had to be his own. Deep down, it is his victory. Observe that he did not invite you into the inner circle until he had discovered the drug. He must succeed alone. We are but trivial accomplices. Now the drug is in place, he can bring in another soul, with no doubt of original ownership for the great act. Your mission, Jane, is to see John through the end.
Uncharacteristically, John Jr. now reached out and held Jane's hand. This was his form of a prayer. It almost seemed he held back tears.
Without showing your hand, you must do all that John asks, and all he does not know to ask. He must bring this drug before the corporation, maneuver its approval, and bring it to market. Sleep-Free will fail as lucidity spreads. Your work will be complete. His venom of vengeance will fertilize new life, resurrecting those in slumber.
"But I love him," she interjected at last, overwhelmed in this Stockholm Syndrome variant. She pulled her hands away, folded her arms across her chest, and scooted away on the shared bench, frustrated at her inability to rid herself of this lie. "I entered your bargain because I saw the means to the change, but now I am lying to the one I love. He's not a client, he's my companion." She paused, reflecting on the depth of the conflict. "I really don't know how to continue this intrigue."
It is easy to continue, because you must. I have lied to John for years. So too did all the vital players in his life, everyone that's cared about him. But he has found his way. Great minds require mighty bulwarks. Will you be the one to take this support away? Will you be the Samson bringing the walls down on his own life, or will you play Delilah but a moment longer? He has found his path, and you will ensure he finds the end. Staying with him is your test of love. It is the greatest love to lie when the truth wants so desperately to be known. Then, when John's work is finished, if he truly loves you, he will replace the burden of sleep with the bonds of love and marriage, a fair trade befitting a return to pre-sleep serenity.
"He won't return my love when he learns what I've done," she replied defiantly, unpacified by John Jr.'s emotional appeal.
You underestimate my son. He has concealed his plan for years. He understands secrecy. Your part will be made known, and he will accept it without question.
Defeated by the master, Jane conceded. "Well, perhaps I won't know how to love him when this is finished, having lied through our whole love affair." John Jr. ignored the pathetic prediction. He understood nobody liked deceit's final outcome. He had cajoled or concocted similar schemes with Carl and Lucius and others. No one truly liked the work, but each believed in the outcome. Ends rarely justify means, but some means are still required. Concluding his interview, John Jr. added,
"As always, you must keep me ever informed. John will need my help as he approaches this critical juncture. I will play the part I have always played, and you will play yours."
He made to leave, but there was more she had to say. Jane reached sideways for his jacket and presumptuously pulled him back to the bench. John wants me to be his test subject with Ray. He wants to prove that a dream alone can make Ray fall in love with me. It's too risky. If we're not careful, Ray is going to find out about me and John. I don't know how I would keep them separate, or keep the media from finding out.
The same way I have kept John's science project private. I have picked up a few jobs on the board no one wants. The gala and corporate security are just two examples. He's too prideful to realize that without my efforts, prying eyes would have discovered his work long ago. I can keep the same eyes off you.
But Ray's the heir. Everyone watches him. They will see us together, and they will follow me into my second or even third life.
Ray's father has kept his family life private for years, proving money can buy discretion. Besides, the press stopped drooling over Ray's dating life long ago.
He concluded with commanding reassurance.
You'll be fine. Just avoid any public dates with John.
That won't be a problem, she grumbled as she turned to leave. As usual, Jane finished the private meeting distraught. She would play her part and play it well, because she loved John.